Well, good morning, everybody. Good morning. Wow, table's a little bit shorter than usual. I should have checked that before I got up here. Maybe I got a little taller. Yeah, that's weird. I had a growth spurt between now and last week. It's weird. Well, this is going to throw me off for the entire service, so just bear with me, all right? Hey, I'm just glad to be together in this time and space with each and every one of you. It's so good. I mean, we had a beautiful morning already together, haven't we? And for those of us who are watching, or for those of you who are watching online, glad that you're joining us online as well. Wish you were here. Just want to send that out to you from my heart. I really, truly wish you were here with us. But hey, diving into the message this morning, I think we know this, that every relationship that we're in experiences like turning points along the way. You know, these become sort of like defining moments in this relationship, sort of like define it as it's moving forward, right? In fact, you might even call these like DTR moments, right? Define the relationship moments. Now, when I was a college kid and still kind of on the dating scene, which was a long time ago, so I'm not even sure if they're still doing it like this, but the DTR was like a big deal, right? It's like you're seeing someone, you're hanging out, you're having a good time, you start dating, and it's like, you got to have the DTR. Have you had the DTR yet? Like, nobody knows what's going on until you have the DTR, which is basically just, I like you, do you like me, circle yes or no, That's pretty much how it went down with Amanda and me, right? Maybe just not without the, circle yes or no part. We had evolved beyond that by that time. So anyway, but I think every relationship experiences something like this. It may not be quite as blatant as that, though. I mean, sometimes these are moments that just sort of pass us by without even noticing. It's like that awkward or hilarious moment between friends that turns into an inside joke. Or it's just an experience that you shared together that was deeply meaningful and powerful and bonding in some way, right? Or maybe it's even a struggle or like a challenge that you've overcome or something that you've accomplished together. And sometimes, it's nothing magical. It's just like things are clicking and things come together in such a way. It's like, wait a second, did we just become best friends? Yep. And again, it's not always this obvious, but I think whatever those moments look like, they become these turning points in our relationships that sort of move those relationships to another level and define it in some way, right? In something that becomes more meaningful, sort of a new status. It's like going from just friends to something more. And, this is really what we've been talking about in this series for the past few weeks. Because everything that really matters in life really comes down to this. It's all about relationships. And I think we all know this, that a life that is empty of relationships is really an empty way of life. And none of us want to find ourselves in a place like that. And so I really believe that all of us, every single one of us, and this is true no matter where you are in your faith journey, that we owe it to ourselves to learn what feels like the lost art of loving well. And so through this series, we've been asking this question: how can we learn to love in ways that draw people closer instead of pushing them away? Because I think we all want those kind of friendships, right? We want those kind of relationships. Like, we want friends, the kind of friends that we have inside jokes together. We want those deep and those meaningful relationships. All of us want that. But I think the challenge for a lot of us in a lot of ways is that we put so much pressure, we put so much emphasis on compatibility in those kinds of connections, right? We put all this pressure on making sure that people are compatible before we even attempt to have a friendship with them. And what I mean by that is that it's like we sort of evaluate based on a certain like criteria, like to make sure that this person lines up with who I am and what I'm about and where I'm at in life, right? And so it's like, are we the same age, and are we at the same stage of life? Do we have similar interests and share the same likes or dislikes? Do we at least agree on most things? And if we can check all those boxes, well, then it's like, okay, yes, we're compatible. We can have a friendship. And, honestly, the logic checks out there. It makes sense. The funny thing is, when I was thinking about this earlier this week, I realized, Amanda and I, in our relationship on paper, we don't make sense. Like if we're just scoring our compatibility based on things we have in common, we failed that test. Literally. Like, I'm not even joking. Several years ago, I say several years ago, it might have been like 15 years ago. I don't know. We signed up to be marriage mentors at the church that we were part of, where I was on staff at the time. And so what they did with the marriage mentors at this time is they had all of the mentors kind of go through the same premarital assessment that all the engaged couples were using. It was sort of a way to kind of help train the mentors on how to use this tool with the couples and things like that. And so Amanda and I, we took this premarital, it was really kind of a compatibility assessment. And a short time later, the care ministry pastor, who's a really close friend of ours, she sat down with us and she was like, okay, as your friend, basically, if you guys weren't already married, I would strongly caution you on moving forward with your relationship. I'm seeing a lot of red flags here, you know? We just didn't have much in common, and we knew that. I mean, that's true. We kind of knew that from the very beginning. It's like, listen, I was the lead guitarist in a punk rock band. And Amanda liked country music. I promised myself I would never get involved with somebody who loved country music. I love to ride roller coasters. You know, I've talked about that with you. And I really wanted somebody who would love to ride roller coasters with me. Amanda is scared to death of them. And at one point, I actually thought I could, like, win her over. I could convert her, you know. It did not go well, you know. Almost ended the relationship right then and there. But maybe the biggest hurdle for us when we were just getting to know each other kind of early in our relationship was when I discovered that Amanda had never even seen Star Wars. I was like, how am I going to build a life with this person? You know, and she was thinking, why does this guy like Star Wars so much? That's so weird. But, you know, on paper, things just don't add up for us. We don't make a whole lot of sense. The truth is we just really, really, really like each other. And you know, 26 years of marriage later, 4 kids and a couple of grandkids later, I think we figured some things out. And we're still figuring some things out, don't get me wrong. But you know, the funny thing here is that one of the things we learned, and kind of the moral of the story is, those compatibility tests don't know jack, okay? But in all seriousness, here's the truth. It is possible to love someone who isn't like you. In fact, sometimes the most meaningful relationships in your life will be with incompatible people. And listen, I don't think we just throw those things out altogether. I mean, we know that it's so much easier to connect with people when we have things in common, like we enjoy doing the same things and we share the same philosophies on different things. Maybe we work in the same field, we cheer for the same teams. Like those aren't bad things. There's nothing wrong with that. And it's okay to want those kind of things in our friendships. The problem is when they become a prerequisite for love. Like when we sort of pre-decide that if we don't have these things in common, well then I won't connect with you. I won't have a real friendship with you. And so we don't. The reality is that God often brings people into our lives who are nothing like us, but have a lot to offer us. People who are at different places in life. People who have different views on things like politics and cultural issues. People who might even have different thoughts about God. And so learning to love well means that we're creating space for those people in our lives as well. I mean, this is how Jesus did it. Right? And what we're going to see here in just a moment is that Jesus, some of his closest friendships were with people who were nothing like him and nothing like each other. And so we're looking at John's gospel this morning. If you brought a Bible with you or happen to have a Bible app with you, I'd encourage you open up to John chapter 15. You can put a finger there. We're going to get to that in just a moment. But John was one of Jesus' closest friends, and he was an eyewitness to everything we're about to look at. He recorded all of this for us. In fact, he sort of captures this moment toward the end of Jesus' life, and Jesus is sharing one final meal with John and the others who had been with him from the very beginning. And this whole evening that they've spent together has been sort of this incredibly intimate moment with Jesus and his apprentices, and it's sort of like leading up to and building up to and really sort of crescendoing into this pivotal statement that Jesus makes. In John chapter 15, verse 15, he says, I no longer call you servants. I no longer call you servants, which basically implies that's what I used to call you. That's what you used to be. right? That was what the nature of this relationship used to look like. And we can see that going back, really, when we trace back through the story of Jesus and his ministry and all of that. I mean, this is how they related to Jesus as their rabbi, their teacher, right? They followed him as their Lord and their master. And apparently Jesus was just fine with those terms. Right? He agreed with that. He felt like that was appropriate. In fact, case in point here, if we just flip back a couple of chapters, this is what Jesus told them in John 13:13. He said, "You call me teacher and Lord, and rightly so, for that is what I am." And so up to that point, I mean, the relationship with Jesus had been defined by those terms. But now Jesus was saying that's no longer the case. Something has shifted in their relationship. It's now changing to a new category. And to understand what's really happening here, we just need to trace back to the events of that evening. And this will help us understand better what Jesus is about to say here in just a minute when we look at what happened earlier that night. In fact, maybe the most striking thing that happened that night is what Jesus did right after dinner. I mean, Jesus, their Lord and Master, the one they called teacher, actually got down on his knees and washed their feet. I mean, he's flipping the script, right? He's serving them in the most humiliating way imaginable, right? And so that's different. That's new. Something is happening here. And then from there, the evening just sort of lingered on as Jesus opened his life to them on a new level. I mean, talking about everything that was about to happen, talking about where he'd be going, talking about the things that would need to happen kind of weeks and months and years down the road. And in a way, Jesus was sort of recapping the past 3 years with these guys and everything that he had taught them and what it was all about. And now he was beginning to help them understand the part that they'd be playing in all of it. And all of this was building up to one of those turning points in their relationship, a DTR moment between Jesus and his closest followers. And so Jesus says here, as we look a little further into verse 15, "I no longer call you servants, because a servant does not know his master's business." I mean, think about that. I mean, servants don't typically get explanations, they just get instructions, right? It's just do what you're told. And to better understand what Jesus is saying here in this moment, I mean, we can kind of put it in modern day terms. It's kind of like, a CEO of a major corporation. It's like the CEO doesn't take a college intern and bring them into the inner workings of that company, right? Like the CEO doesn't bring the college intern into the secret sauce behind the business model and the marketing strategy and those kind of things. But that's exactly what Jesus is doing with these guys. And it changed everything. And so then Jesus said, again, finishing out verse 15, he said, "Instead, I have called you friends. For everything that I learned from my Father, I have made known to you." So now Jesus is saying, you know way more than a servant ever would or ever should. You know me, first and foremost, Jesus said. And what's more, you know the Father. And so you're not just following orders anymore. You're sharing in the mission. You are now a part of this. So I no longer call you servants, Jesus said. I call you friends. And because of that friendship, they had become friends with each other. Now, what I find so fascinating about that is just how different these guys were, not just from Jesus, but how different they were from each other. I mean, you look at this group of guys, 12 guys. I mean, they're from all stages of life and walks of life. They're different ages, right? Some of them are fishermen and tradesmen. Some of them are businessmen. In fact, here's what I find kind of hilarious about this. I mean, there's one guy in the group with Jesus who was literally an anti-Roman revolutionary. And then there's another one who was actually a Roman collaborator working as a tax collector. I mean, when you look at these guys, they had more there to divide them than they ever had in common, right? And so it wasn't compatibility that brought them together. It was their shared relationship with Jesus. In fact, Jesus said something really interesting in the very next verse. If we look at verse 16, he's reminding them, "You did not choose me, but I chose you, and I appointed you." They didn't choose each other. Jesus chose them, which means that Jesus also chose to place them in each other's lives. So here's what I've been thinking about all week. What I've been thinking about all week is what if God brings people into our lives, right? I mean, people, regardless of their interests, regardless of their taste in music, regardless of their stage in life or just any other measure of compatibility that we might use. But what if God chooses to bring these people into our lives for a reason? Because he knows that by combining our lives together, it has the power and the potential to unleash something beautiful in our lives and in this world. I mean, that's what we see happening here with Jesus and his closest friends and his followers. And really, I think this is the message for us today out of this, and really what Jesus is calling us to and urging us to open your life to the people that God brings into your life. Open your life to them. I mean, we may not be at the same place in life. We may not have the same interests. We may not even have the same view on different things. But God has brought these people into our lives for a reason, to enrich our lives in some way. And so who has God brought into your life who's nothing like you? You probably don't have to think too hard on that, really. And you don't have to look very far either. I mean, just think about your neighbors, your coworkers, maybe even people sitting with you here this morning, maybe even members of your own family, right? Whoever they are, whoever God has brought into your lives, whatever they look like, here's the invitation for us and what I believe God, why he's brought them into our lives. To learn from them, partner with them, and run toward them. And listen, in some of your relationships, some of the people that just came to mind for you, it might just be one of these things. And in others, it could be all three. But what if this is why God has brought them into our lives? First of all, to learn from them. To learn from them. Years ago, we were starting new small groups at one of the churches that I served. And you know, I'd been leading small groups for a long time. I'd even been a small groups pastor through a stretch of years, part of my career. And so I'd always learned and kind of understood the logic that when you're going to start new groups and you want those groups to succeed, you need to group those people around some kind of common, something they share in common, you know, usually at the very least stage of life. You know, you want them to have something that's going to bond them together, right? And so that was my plan moving into this new season with groups at this church, and we're going to try to group people according to stage of life. But as we started to look at the people who had signed up for the groups at that time, just for a variety of reasons, we realized we're not going to be able to do that. We're not going to have the people that we need to really group those people together like that. And so really by necessity, we just sort of decided we're going to throw out the experts and their advice on this. And we're just going to start putting anyone in any group, and we're just going to hope for the best and pray for the best, right? And so I'm sitting there in our brand new small group, week one, and I'm looking around, and to my left, there's this couple. They're newly married, no kids, in their 20s. To my right, there's this other couple who's in their late 50s, grandparents. They're already starting to flirt with the idea of retirement, you know. There's another person in the group who's single. There's another person in the group who's married, but her spouse isn't attending with her. And then us in our early 40s with you know, 4 kids in the home, you know, ranging from elementary age to high school age. And I'm thinking, is this group going to even work? We don't have, like, we're so different. How is this group going to work? Is it going to work? And I'm telling you, we met with that group every week for 10 weeks. And by the end of those 10 weeks, not only did that group work, but it was one of the best small group experiences we've ever had. We connected so well with every single person in that group. And everyone in the group was saying the same thing, and it wasn't just our group, it was the other groups too that were built just like that. They're saying, man, this was such a surprisingly rewarding experience. Right? It was so good, it worked so well that actually became like our new default model when we started forming new groups at this church. It's like, why are we going to put people together who are just like each other? Instead, let's start putting people together who can actually learn from each other and grow together, right? I mean, it's amazing how much we can learn from each other's life experiences and faith journeys and even just perspectives on the world around us when we're all coming at this from different angles, different stages, different places in life. And that experience, I think, is just a great picture of how we should approach any of our relationships. And I think it starts with just a genuine curiosity and a humble openness that just says, help me understand this from your perspective. I want to understand this from your perspective. And this could be anything from parenting to politics, right? I mean, financial help and advice to faith. I mean, everything from like career advice to cultural issues. Listen, I want to understand this from your perspective. I want to see this through your experience and how you've interacted with the realities that have impacted your life in a way that's different than mine. I want to understand this from your perspective. And it doesn't always mean that we'll come out agreeing with each other, but it does mean that we'll get to know each other on a much deeper level. And we can actually learn some things from each other along the way. Someone said this, and I picked this up in a book that he wrote, and I just love this. And he happens to be a follower of Jesus, but he said anytime anyone's asked him where he stands on an issue, he's learned to respond with this. He said, I don't stand on issues, I walk with people. I love that. I don't stand on issues, I walk with people. And listen, that's not wishy-washy, that's Christ-like. That's like Jesus, that's love. That's patience, that's humility. And listen, it doesn't always mean that it doesn't mean that we won't hold to our convictions. It just means that we put people first. And I believe this is really what Paul, the Apostle Paul, was getting at when he wrote this line in one of his letters to the early church. He said, do nothing out of selfish ambition or vain conceit. Rather, in humility, value others above yourselves, not looking to your own interests, but each of you to the interest of the others. I mean, man, imagine what we could learn from each other if we just lived by that. Maybe that's why God has brought some people into your life, to learn from them, or maybe it's to partner with them. And then maybe we go back to what Jesus was saying in John 15. This is actually what he had in mind all along. Not that we would just learn to like each other and get along, but that we would actually work together with him and with each other. In fact, that's what Jesus says as he finishes this thought in verse 16. We looked at the first part where Jesus said, I chose you, I appointed you so that you might go and bear fruit. Fruit that will last. I mean, Jesus elevated his friends and made them partners in his ongoing work, which is so much bigger than us. And he knew that we would need his help and we would need each other. And so think about this. He brings his followers together in friendship for the purpose of partnership in his mission. And the Apostle Paul is a great example of this, someone we read about in the scriptures. In fact, Luke documented Paul's ministry as an eyewitness to a lot of it in the book of Acts, in the New Testament. The book of Acts, if you've read that, you know it really is sort of like a chronicle, like a historical record of the early church as it was beginning to take shape there in the first century. And of course, the Apostle Paul played a huge part in that, and Luke documents a lot of that and records a lot of that so we can see that. And as we follow Paul's journeys, one of the things we notice about him is that he always had someone with him, always had someone by his side, a companion, like whether it was Silas or Barnabas or even Luke himself at different times, and there were many others, right? And these were people who were incredibly important to Paul. And then when you go through the New Testament, you start reading the personal letters of Paul. He talks about these guys and these people, and you can actually feel it. I mean, these weren't just like friends and acquaintances of his. These were his brothers and his sisters. These were his partners in the mission. And so maybe God has brought people into your life to be that for you. People who complement your strengths and weaknesses so that you can team up together to have an impact on this world, a unique impact on this world for the cause of Jesus. People who can walk side by side with you and encourage you and support you in your faith journey. People who might be so different from you, but listen, if all you have in common is Jesus, and that's it, and nothing else but Jesus, that's more than enough. And maybe that's why God has brought these people into our lives to learn from them, to partner with them. I believe there's another reason why God brings these people into our lives, and it's to run toward them. And I want to explain what I mean by that, right? Because the truth is, the reality is for every single one of us, there comes a time in our lives and in our journeys, whether it's life or faith, and we lose our way. It happens. It happens. And all of us, we need friends who know us and love us and care enough about us that they're willing to run toward us when we start to disengage, drift away, or maybe even self-destruct. And this is so important, so vital to our faith journeys. And I believe it's a huge reason why God brings people into our lives. But to be completely transparent with you this morning, I almost didn't even want to talk about this because it can be so sensitive. Because I think all of us have probably seen how this principle, this concept has been wildly misused and misapplied and just exercised poorly. Right? Because there are times when, we see someone who's lost their way and we might assume that it's our responsibility to call them out. Like we're supposed to confront every issue that we disagree with that we see in someone's life. Like it's somehow our job that we're supposed to chase these people down and set them straight. And I mean, if you've seen this or experienced this, I mean, you've seen how quickly things can go pretty badly. And it can get ugly, right? And the sad reality is, if you've been in the church long enough, you've probably had some kind of experience and you probably have stories. I've got some stories. In fact, I'll share one of them with you right now. When Amanda and I were newly married, we were part of a small church that her parents had helped start, and it started in their living room. And it was kind of an interesting experience. And at this point, though, we had sort of left the living room. We were meeting in a rented space, but I mean, still a very small church. And I'm talking like 20 people on a good Sunday. Very small group. And the pastor of this church, he was really trying to take things to the next level, really wanted to see the church begin to grow in some ways. And so he was trying all the different strategies. And so he decided to plan this big, grand opening celebration Sunday. And we were trying to invite all the neighbors to come and be a part of it. We even did a mailer. We even rented the big tent. I mean, all of it, it was a big deal. But he happened to plan this on a Sunday when my mother-in-law had already planned to be away out of town and something that was really important to her. But of course, the pastor didn't like that because, one of his core members not going to be at this big deal, this big grand opening celebration. So this guy, this pastor, decided to go to my mother-in-law's office during her workday, and he walked into her office with a copy of the church membership covenant. And he slammed that covenant down on her desk and said, in no uncertain terms, "You are in violation of that covenant if you're not there on Sunday." We haven't seen or heard from him since. It's a mystery. Nobody knows. If you knew my mother-in-law, you might have some theories about that. But we weren't members of that church much longer after that. Listen, when we talk about running towards someone, that's not this. That's not what this looks like. Frankly, that's not even what love looks like. Nor is it an accurate reflection of God's heart in those moments. In fact, if you really want a good picture of God's heart for us in these moments when we drift away, when we lose our way, I would encourage you to go to Luke chapter 15. In fact, I'm not going to read this for us this morning because it would just take way too much time. But even if you have read this, especially if you've never read this, go to Luke chapter 15. Jesus tells 3 parables in this chapter. And each one of them, I think, captures just beautifully God's heart for us in these moments. Right? He talks about the first story. He talks about a shepherd who leaves 99 sheep to go in search of the one who's in trouble. And he finds that lost sheep. He rescues that sheep. He lovingly brings it back. He tells another story, the second one, where he talks about this woman who like desperately and passionately turns the whole house upside down until she finds this precious coin that's been lost, and it means so much to her. The third story that he tells there in Luke 15 is one, maybe it's the one that we're most familiar with, where he talks about this father who day after day watches the horizon for his wayward son and his lost son, his prodigal son. And he watches that horizon until the day that he sees his son there in the distance. And it's like he just forgets his dignity and just runs towards his son, embraces him, welcomes him home. And this is the heart of God. I mean, it's not confrontation from a distance. It's pursuit with compassion. And all of these stories that Jesus tells here, they picture someone who runs toward us with a heart that says, I care for you. You matter to me. I want what's best for you. And Jesus wants you and me to run toward each other in the same way, with the same heart for each other. And maybe that's why he's brought some of these friendships into your life. People who have that kind of relationship with you. That when you start to drift away, when you start to self-destruct, they can run toward you with love and grace and humility. And just, as a friend would say, what's going on? Where have you been? What are you doing? Listen, no matter what, and I mean no matter what, I love you. And I want God's very best for you. And you're welcome back anytime. We all need friends who will run toward us. And we need to be willing to run toward them as well. We may not always share the same interest or the same taste in things. We may not be at the same stage of life. We may not even have the same opinions on everything or even anything. But loving well means refusing to shrink your circle to people just like you. So open your life to the people God brings into it. Because the friendships you didn't plan and didn't expect, those might be the ones that God uses the most. Let me pray for us. Jesus, thank you so much. Thank you first and foremost for the cross, what we talked about and remembered and celebrated together earlier this morning. What a demonstration of your love. You even said in John 15, you said, no greater love has anyone than this, that they would lay down their life for their friends. And that's how you see us, Father. Your friends that you've brought into relationship with you, friends that you've brought into relationship with each other. Even when it seems like we have nothing else in common. So, Father, we just ask that you help us to see those people as you see them in our lives, that we would open our lives to them, that in humility we would learn from one another, partner with one another, even run toward one another in love as often as we see a friend in need. Help us to live this, Jesus, in your name. Amen. Thank you, Cypress. Have a beautiful week. We'll see you next Sunday.